Okay. I have been charged with the responsibility to chair this panel for whatever kind of honor that is. Just briefly, the panel is made up of the editorial team, more or less. We have also heard from Janetta, one of the fifth editor. She just gave us a good introduction and background. My name's Gregor. I'm from UIT, the Arctic University of Norway. And my colleague Tuija.
I'm Tuija Turunen from University of Lapland.
We have
Diane Hirschberg from the University of Alaska Anchorage.
And standing in.
Yes, my name is Pekka Keskitalo, and I'm behalf of Mairi here because of a strike in Helsinki. So
yeah, she's unable to be here. So yeah. Thank you very much for standing in there. Anyway, before we sort of dive into the themes that the book covers, I think it would be helpful to just reflect a little on what we've done well, perhaps challenges we've met on, and what kind of future directions. So I'm going to start by asking you, Tuija, what kind of successes have we had from this project?
At least if we can count that as a success. Sorry. Success is the hard work. So our authors work really well together. The editorial team did a very good job. But also I think that the success is about this theme. This is something that we have all heard a lot, read a lot, but not in very specific context of circumpolar north. But then also the challenges, I think that the biggest perhaps, we started with COVID, but then we learned how to communicate in Teams and Zooms. So that's fine. But war in Ukraine is something that really had an effect because in our thematic network, we are Arctic thematic network on teacher education. We have, but now suspended many Russian colleagues, which we have been working a lot together. And then this war happened, and it just started when we were given the final book to the publisher.
Yeah.
So that made some hiccups. And I'm sure that that's also reflected in the areas we are talking here. So at least we who have been working with this, we notice the parts that actually are missing. So that's practical, not going to content, but very sad thing.
Yes. Yeah. It's certainly presented us with a number of challenges. In light of the more practical challenges, were there any more academic focused challenges, Diane?
I do think in trying to address a very broad sense of topics and keep it focused. We started with 3 content areas, and then we asked people to contribute them, and people had very different ideas. We certainly were not going to ask. We did not predetermine how people should think about equity and inclusion. Inclusion in particular having many different meanings, whether we're talking very specifically about special education or talking very broadly about culturally responsive education and working with diverse populations linguistically, or from immigrant populations in the US and minority populations. So it was a challenge when we thought we had these 3 very clear areas and suddenly came back with, well, it's not so clear. And actually I think that was a very good thing because we wanted to adjust to the contributors rather than saying you must adjust to our preconceived notions that may or may not have been right about what was the focus. I think
it made us more focused as well.
It did make us more focused. And I think the other piece is this challenge of we always can say, oh, we're still missing this perspective, yes, we only have one chapter from Russia, and they have a very different perspective on this, and it would have been nice to have 2 or 3 chapters from Russia, but the pandemic really made that difficult to do that next round of outreach. And so we're very careful to say we're not representing the entirety of the North, but what we are doing is giving a very, very important and missing insight into pieces of the experience of the North.
Yeah, and picking up the various pieces and voices, perhaps, Ika, you could provide us some reflections on the Indigenous voice here. How is that represented? Have we done it well, or could we do it better?
Yes. First of all, this book provides a very broad and I think very important arena and voice of the marginalized or fragile communities. And for teacher education experts, I think it is very important in these regions where and these contexts where we work. So it's very important to think about that what have the education specifically, what kinds of challenges there are, and what we have to do, because we work in a situation where we maybe lack of competent teachers, and most of the people are tending to move away from our areas, and population is getting older, and there's not so many families maybe in the villages nowadays. So we face in educational field a new situation, and I'm happy also be part of writing about these indigenous and regional minority languages context together with Mairi and Hanna Helander. So I think in that sense, I think this book is having and giving certain value in the field, and much needed also. And I hope that pre-service students will read it in your courses. So please put them in the curriculum. I think it's a good advice here.
Yes, indeed. We're very much pitching this as a resource for teachers of teachers, because something that current research has been very interested in is how we form the teachers' identities and how they work inclusively, how they work particularly in the area that we're looking at here in the circumpolar north. So with that in mind, how can we take this project forward? And this is a question to the whole panel, so feel free to step forward.
I'm not get started. Today, when we were sharing our learnings about doing this book, and at some point, and I said that during the day, that at some point I thought that, okay, we can't do anything, just that it needs to be policy level change first, and then we can actually make some changes. But then we heard a couple of very interesting presentations about the studies, small-scale studies, but critical participatory approach, and at least one or two even them ended up that had an impact on policy at policy level. So that was really like encouraging. Okay, even though we think that this is a small thing, but when we just do it because we know that it's the work which is for us to do, nobody else cares about the North. It's us here. If we do it and then we go out and say to policymakers or people, other people, that this actually matters, we can make a difference. And that was a wow moment for me today. And I think that is maybe the way forward from here, kind of the next step.
I am thinking about how do we make sure that our voices get heard in other arenas, because I think there's both this group of people working together again and hopefully bringing in more colleagues and more collaborators, but also where we push out. For example, I'd worked on the Arctic Human Development Report, and it's time for the next one, where we're coming up on 10 years since we started the 2015 Arctic Human Development Report. And when I worked on that, there were so few resources to draw on across the circumpolar north. And so I was grabbing individuals and saying, can you help me with pieces of it? And now there's both a network and I think an active conversation to really change that. So there's places like that. There's perhaps us thinking about going back for another Sustainable Development Working Group, Arctic Council project. And then I think there's also taking what we're doing to the Global South. As somebody in the US context where I would go to AERA, which is the equivalent to FERA in the US, American Education Research Association, and my colleagues would say, oh, but Alaska, it's not generalizable. Well, yes, this work is of huge value to other nations or other southern parts of the nations that we are from. So how do we take it to them?
Yes, and certainly we have realized after the COVID that you are not able to create your ideas alone. So I think this kind of network creates this kind of knowledge that is needed in these northern regions. And of course, it's totally usable also outside the Arctic area, because we have got similarities when we go to, for example, to Australia and New Zealand. So I think this network has already, provided for the practitioners a platform where to construct and reconstruct the knowledge and also spread the knowledge and discuss about the challenges and maybe the best practices.
That links quite nicely to the second theme, which was engendering solutions to structural and geographical challenges in education in the circumpolar north. And I would argue that the network we've built up here and any future developments of that network is part of that structural change, sure. What else have we either developed or could develop that could contribute to these kind of changes? Would you like to?
Sure. I think I might say that this is a group who is unafraid to take on difficult conversations and to call out whether it's looking at the need to talk about decolonization or to talk about the structural racism and other forms of inequity that we are not afraid to also then call out policymakers and say we need to look at this differently. We need to invest differently in our education system, as well as learn from each other what has worked and what hasn't. And I think that's some of us may in our individual university and school places not have a safe environment to say some of these things, but through this network, collectively, we can say those difficult things.
Yes, and I also think that it's the learning about different phenomena, like living in small places and what comes with that, and learning ways to change things. Like in our chapter, we interviewed young people in a small locality, and ask them, so one of the author of that book, that chapter, that if you have some challenges, where do you find help? Can you go to school nurse? And the answer is no. That's my mother's best friend. It's because everybody knows everybody. But then we can, maybe digital online support or doing what kind of different twist to things and going around the corner and see the possibilities, and that's a mutual learning here. And I hope that also through this book we will find some solutions to these kind of things that we never think about if we don't go and ask.
When we look at the chapters in the book, so we can easily see that critical studies and these kind of experimental and interdisciplinary and innovative studies are needed as education is working with groups who otherwise maybe be silent or their voices are not brought up. So education is a place where we have to go and, bring forth that what do our kids and youth say and what kinds of, challenges and ideas parents do have got, because these voices are otherwise maybe silent and not heard so education has a profound, I think, educational studies has got profound need in the society, so that they are coming knowledge and created knowledge that is really useful for every levels of society from bottom until up. So I think this is really, really something that educators are proud of, I guess. That this is one of the key research fields, but it is maybe not so set in the research field that education is important, but we know that education is important.
And I do think that for me is a big piece that I find that some of the, and I'm especially reflecting on the US, that the national education plan, national Arctic research plans and the big gatherings don't always recognize that education research is a part of creating sustainability solutions. And when I have, colleagues who study snow and ice telling me that they don't do education, they do research, and it's like, wait a minute, education is a field of scholarship and research alongside having a role to transmit knowledge. And so this gives us an opportunity, I think, also to reach back out to people from very different disciplines and say, when you want to talk about how we respond, whether it's climate change or economic inequalities, don't bring us in at the end to share your research. Bring us in at the beginning to make your research better by having you understand the role that education plays in transforming society.
Yeah. Here, which was actually my next point. I was going to ask, what kind of future direction should we take in our project? Should we produce more material like this? Should we have a more research focus? Should we focus on research training? So yeah, and you've touched on that quite well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Yes to all of the above.
Yes,
Please, lots of money if you're listening. But no, okay. Talking more seriously, I wholeheartedly agree that we need to have a stronger presence in the Arctic research field. We should be part of many more projects and not just brought in at the end. Exactly how shall we manage to do that? So you've already said something about that. Maybe Pigga or Tuija have some thoughts there.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think that there are many arenas or many ways to actually do research. We have done desktop studies, so even not going anywhere, but looking at the existing materials. and also at policy level, we can have impact. But the most interesting, and I think that most powerful, is to work with professionals in the field, with teachers, teacher educators, student teachers, those who have great professional knowledge and understanding. And when we listen to them and do research with them together, and that also might give them some new ideas about the practice, but also gives us a lot of thinking, and then we can take it to the international level. So I think that is something that we have done, and I'd like to see us to continue even more extensive level, so that we could have schools and as part of our like everyday partners of our networking, and that is the very interesting view. If you think in the future, in 5 years, we have schools and teachers and children, because they say children and young people who are living in the north, we often look at south. So they go on holidays to south, and they have friends there, and all the big cities and things like that. But what if we help the children and young people to look at who is their neighbor, or who actually lives up north from here, and then we have a real impact when the children and young people actually learn that, oh wow, there are other people like us who actually go ice fishing, or who do snowmobiling, or who like things that we do. There are other people, and we can talk with them, and then we can take also the science to the very beginning level, because these children and young people will be the scientists, natural scientists in the future, if they have chance to learn about the specifics that are happening here.
Yes, and education actually, when you think about, for example, the family discussion in Finland, it's everywhere. Spending electricity, not in Norway, but in Finland, yes, and climate change. So the profound question here is that what do the people need to change? What they need to do differently because of the world situation. So it is something to do with learning. So educators, in that sense, are needed in the research projects to put the questions towards them. The change is going to happen when you know, it is something to do with education again.
Excuse me. And a theme that came up in some of the chapters and in our conversations is also the learning that's happening and the sharing of knowledge on the land, in families, in communities, that it's also that the way we educate is inclusive of, but not restricted to, these buildings, but also so many other ways. And that, again, when I think about natural scientists going out into communities to look at climate change, or to look at what's happening with risks to flora and fauna, that there's so much knowledge sharing going on in communities that they may not be recognizing, because they aren't trained to hear it and to elicit that, and to bring us into that conversation with them, to understand how they can better understand the knowledge that exists in these places, that could, in some cases, really strengthen the work they're doing. And I think that's another place for us to be in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, as we said, we need research funding. So that would be great. But I'm not here to bang on too much about that. Because we have, like I said, we've achieved a project which has combined partners from around the circumpolar north. Not just from Europe, not just from North America, not just Russian, and that's something for us to be proud of. However, to take it a step further and secure a larger amount of money to have a larger research project, for example, that will require some significant political support, perhaps. But anyway, how are we doing on time? Can I just check how much time was scheduled? 20 minutes to go. Lots of time then.
Yeah.
Grand. Well, I was thinking of maybe opening up the floor to questions from the audience, because there are a number of very attentive listeners here at the moment. But it would be nice to hear any thoughts and ideas from the floor. Please.
This is not a kind question, but it's a free question. But I'm having no one ask me that, but I'd also give you a chance to ask it to you. What would you say are the three main challenges that faces education in the
Okay, I'm just going to repeat your question for the record here. Question from Benedicta was, what are the three main challenges that we face in education in the circumpolar north? Should we just write them down?
Well, or what each of us think are the three main. It'd be interesting to see if we agree or disagree.
Yeah, so I think that what I've been thinking lately, that one challenge is that, especially for our basic education and secondary education and so on, which has the curriculum, it's curriculum guided. The curriculum is made in places that are not the local ones. Okay, in Finland, the localities also do their own curriculum, but still, the framework is made with an idea that one size fits all. And that makes teachers at school teaching the things that are not relevant for the area, and that's true everywhere. And I think that we should have more ownership of the curriculum and the contents and how it's actually relevant to the people. And also that would give the ownership for the education to people who actually are part of that in the community. So providing the sense of ownership and relevance, I think that are the challenges. And that same goes with teacher education. In teacher education, we think that one size fits all. The more it is the same in the whole country, the better. And we are having more national that and more national that and more national that, which actually we are very different here in Rovaniemi from the capital area. Do the similar kind of things our teachers do a good job here or there. So I think that one size does not fit all, not in anything.
Yeah. No, I agree. Can I butt in? I think you're going to get 4 here because there's 4 of us. But anyway, yeah, my main concern currently involves the geopolitical situation with the recent suspension of our Russian partners, both in this project and also at the EU-Arctic and Council level, because this is going to divide us. This is going to mean that we develop our own way of thinking in one group, and there'll be another way of thinking in another. And we have worked within our own thematic network over the last, since it was established, to bring together these ideas. And now we're being pushed apart. And that is a really bad thing, in my opinion. I think that's one of the biggest challenges we're going to face on that level. Not that we need one size for the whole world. Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly. We need local solutions, but we also need to be able to compare those local solutions and share our ideas and thinking. And building a wall, which is effectively what's happened, to produce this divided system, we're back in the Cold War era, which is which is, yeah, harsh.
So I might look at two interrelated issues. One is that while there are still a lot of scholars and in the North American context and European Indigenous leaders and researchers talking about colonization and understanding the impact that it has had, that has not infiltrated into the policymaking realm to say that we need to look at different ways for structuring the education system that are not grounded in Southern structures imposed in the North. That has also led to, in many places, schools that simply fail to educate children in ways that encourage the children to continue. So we have high stopout rates that, people talk about, oh, these students dropped out without understanding that dropout might be actually an act of defiance, a very intentional choice to say, this is not a system I can see myself in, so I'm not going to participate. What that means is those students are not graduating, and then they're not going on to get the credentials that allows them to be the teachers and the principals in the current system as it exists. And so when we talk about there not being enough teachers in the North and there not being enough Northern and Indigenous people going into teaching, well, we've got a vicious cycle. So now we bring in Southerners who don't stay. Students don't see themselves as educators. They drop out, and the cycle just continues. And so we really have a pretty difficult and systemic challenge that some places are finding some really, really good solutions to that. And we need to share that more, but we also need to invest the resources and empower communities to be able to take those resources and make the changes that would stop this cycle from continuing.
Yes, I think if there is a natural bridge to saying like that, we are under huge threat of losing our socio and ecocultural diversity, and it is something to do with the challenges that these northern regions have had, hundreds of years, but the recent decades also, and at the same time, it is something to do with the demographic and power systems that really don't fit into the region. So I think there is a lot to do with that understanding and producing knowledge and bringing solutions and suggestions that what do we need to do so that the democracy will be, something that is, we are then going to talk about equity when we have solved out at least one of the challenges of democracy. And, this huge threat of losing the ecocultural and sociocultural diversity, this is a challenge in European Union, but it seems to be a huge challenge also in our societies, like I in the morning said that, for example, there is 500 called Sami speakers and so on. So there is something that really needs to be understood, that what does that mean, that ACT support needs to be better, and it doesn't cost a lot. It is only like, we're talking about 40,000 euros in these kind of, or 200,000 euros. But it's not even the money issue, but it's something that it is not yet understood. What does that mean, really?
Yes, great. 4 quite different answers. Any further questions or reflections as well? You don't have to ask a question. You can just give a point of view.
I was wondering, as a continuation for that previous question of the challenges, so what kind of thoughts do you have about the solutions? So have you got any idea of what would be the things that would enhance sustaining the sociocultural and intercultural diversity in the
I might speak to, again, with that North American context, that we have many people who carry with them this profound knowledge that needs to be shared, that needs to be documented before it leaves this realm, right, with the elders who hold great knowledge, but also the younger people who could share what would work better, what would work differently, what would be an environment in which you would feel seen, heard, and able to learn. And where is it working? I think and I have been guilty of this, I am sure, focusing so much on the difficulties and not looking at the places where there are really brilliant solutions. And because where I have visited and seen it, I tend to focus on those, like Ayaprun Eliknarvik, which is one of the first Yupik language immersion programs in Alaska, where there is just this beautiful learning experience going on for the children and for the educators and for the community and parents. And those children go on to be very successful by both community measures and by the reductionist, graduating high school, going on to college, those kinds of numeric. They're successful across all of these, much like we talked about Kamehameha in Hawaii, where they have like an 80% college going rate, but those are also kids who are fluent in their native Hawaiian language. And so we have these places grounded in place, grounded in language, grounded in culture, grounded in traditional ways of teaching and learning. And they are producing children who are our future leaders. So how do we allow those opportunities for all children, regardless of where they come from and where they live? Including thinking about the new immigrants who come into our schools and who bring a whole different set of talents that come with their worldviews and their linguistic backgrounds and their experiences, and how do we capitalize on that rather than trying to fit them into our box?
Yes. Tuija maybe already said that one solution does not fit everywhere. So here we talk about values that maybe it's important for understand that those values who are valuable in our capital towns, they are not, they are not working in these regions where we live. So most of the conflicts may come from that point that those values are brought to the areas and then, as a given values, and then they are not fitting here. So there are coming lots of conflicts because of that. And we are talking about like deep societal challenges here, but what comes to the education, maybe it's easier then to understand that there's in the local communities, those solutions already exist, that we just need to bring them forth. And I visited, for example, Nunavut once, and they were like also created one kind of solutions that might work with parents and kids, so that teachers are not giving the solutions, but the solutions are coming from the families. This is only one small example about that how we can think vice versa of the challenges and issues here.
Yeah. And I think, because I'm a teacher educator, so I see teacher education as a tool to actually make sense and as a solution as well. If we think, for example, today I was having a lecture with our first year student teachers, 90 around, and in 5 years they will graduate, and during their teaching career they will meet hundreds and hundreds of children and young people. So with those 100 student teachers or 90, which were in the lecture hall with me during their career, they have a huge impact on hundreds and thousands of children and young people. So if we can transform our teacher education and make these things happening then the future teachers can then make a change in their work during their careers.
Yeah, good stuff. Now, Anne had a question, but she left the room a few minutes ago, so we can wait for her to return. But I mean,
I might add just one other thought that came up
Go for it.
listening to my colleagues, which is one of our projects in teacher education a few years ago, we would take educators out to rural communities and teach them a combination of place-based and standards-based approaches to the curriculum using the Alaska standards. And the teachers would come back, and particularly with place-based and project-based learning, they'd say, oh, this works for all my students, not just my Indigenous students. And we seem to have somewhere, well, I do know the history of it. You know, there was a point where we decided it was better to put students in a row and talk at them and make them sit still quietly and then have them give us back the information on a piece of paper rather than being creative and in flexible rooms like what we were looking at the other day. And so we know what works. It's when I listen to people say, why can't we be more like Finland? I'm like, if you just listen to the teacher education and education policy specialists across the US and what they're saying, we would have Finland's. None of it is rocket science. It is best practices, but our policymakers don't listen to teacher educators. And I think that may be our biggest challenge, is how we look at people and say, well, I went to school in a room that looked like this, and it worked for me, therefore this is how it should be, rather than saying we need to listen to teacher educators and communities on what is going to work in that context and create an environment and invest in that environment.
Yeah, please go,
I
Pam.
was wondering, how can digital strategies contribute to the challenges
Okay,
that are part of the circumstance?
but I'll just repeat the question. How can digital pedagogies contribute to the challenges that are part of education in the circumpolar north? How can they? Well, we have just had a very rapid shift to online teaching, and then a bit more gradual shift back. But we haven't exactly reset. We haven't gone back to where we were. We've gone back to a new standard. So yeah, where are we there?
Well, I think it's making education reachable in the regions where there is lack of, education institutions and lack of competent teachers. So digitalization, first of all, make that, everyone can attend to education through digitalization. And it will also help the producing or creating learning materials that are culturally responsive, because, for example, in these contexts where we work, there might be lack of, learning materials that fit here. So that's a way to produce together with learners such materials that might be better, I can say. And also, of course, we learned a lot during COVID, that's for sure, and also saw a lot of challenges, and that where the institutions were not prepared really, and also that we learned also that teachers and pupils and youth need those devices. It is not possible to be in remote learning without those devices, basic things. But we me and Tuija with Hanna in the Atlas project, we worked with Sami language distance education project, which is hosted by the municipality of Utsjoki. And they sent for 160 children in whole Finland distance education in Sami language. And we were together with parents and children and teachers working in the Atlas project for, it is now the third year, maybe we are ending with the project. But we also learned that it is also possible to revitalize the endangered languages through digital technologies. And that's a good way here to understand. But also digitalization might have lots of challenges and bad things if you are not aware of them.
But I'd like to, I have a dream, kind of how this digitalization and XR, virtual reality, augmented reality, could actually make connecting with other people very easy, so that we think that we are sharing the same reality. For example, we had this plan about putting a 360 camera on a person's hat, and then the person is going around their own environment, and other person from somewhere else can join the being together. So, and it's not that far away, and it's not that expensive anymore, and it's developing in big steps. But also, this what we use now, but also the technology that make it easier for us to connect with people. And then what is left is to challenge the time differences, but we are humans, so that's part of the challenge all the time. But things like that.
Yeah, many fun things.
And I think, you know, for most, I think, of the educators, the sudden switch came as a shock when they suddenly had to go online. My institution, our teacher education programs, went fully online in 2006, I think. So I'd already been doing this on and off, because I'm not in our College of Education now, but I've been on and off. And I had thoughtful professional development, which really allowed us to think it's not that you do the same thing when you're online. But the other is when I thought, oh, I miss being in the classroom with my students face to face. And then I had one of my Indigenous rural students say, I so prefer this because no one's talking over me. And I can, you know, and no one has to look at me while I'm speaking. There were all these ways that online communication enabled some people to participate in ways that they couldn't in a physical classroom. And so I think there's lessons to be learned if we talk to people about what worked. But we also, of course, have a state where there are places where there is no internet access, or the internet access is this little tiny bit in a school. So I worked with a teacher who, you know, at 2 a.m. would go in to download things, and then she'd print things and put it on the doorstep of the houses in her village. So we're a long ways from providing equitable access, and particularly in-home equitable access. But we've learned so much. I think we actually have a fairly clear understanding of what we need to do. It's do we have the will to actually provide those services so that every family can afford it in every place across the North.
Yep. Some very good points there, and I'm just aware of time. However, we have time for one last question. And Anne, you raised your hand a moment ago, but Sue, we beat you to it. But now it's your turn, please.
You may have answered this, but I just, we're all here north and Arctic researchers. So just thinking about how global change has come about in the last 10 years, how is that focus, or how has that changed part of refocus to the work that we do, why it's so important?
So global change and how that's affected the work that we're doing.
And that's the work that you're doing, since you've been doing it.
I think that depending, of course, what you mean with global change, but at least from maybe from northern perspective, yes, the change is the young people have their way of living has changed a lot, and children's. And I think that in digitalisation, we are living in different era, different time, and why not learn from our youngsters when they say that, oh, my friend from Brazil, or yes, I know someone who is from New Zealand. Would you like me to ask what's the weather there? Things like that, and then being proud of their own culture and sharing that with their networks. So why shouldn't we learn something about that? I think that is maybe something. Maybe they are doing better than we old ones.
The older ones, yes, indeed. The world is much more connected.
Yeah.
As we all know, and we see a generation growing up in social media and just having information at their fingertips, relatively speaking. Any further thoughts from this side?
Yeah, we can see that global changes has caused, first of all, migration, and because of that, our societies has become more diverse. There is some pluses and negative things. For example, this migration has caused changes in our northern villages. That there is 90% of elders living in those villages, and then 75% of children living outside these traditional core areas. So this is causing, of course, new demands into education. That's for sure. And then also we are maybe losing some of the diversity within this course of rapid changes. That at the same time we are becoming more diverse, but at the same time we are losing that diversity. It means that there is some kind of changes in society, so that we are losing some of the traditional languages, or they are under serious threat of being dying or disappearing from the planet. So this is maybe something that must be taken more seriously. Even North Sami has got similar challenges, and they have, of course, they have said that after maybe 20 years, this North Sami, which is still spoken by 35,000 of people, is becoming smaller, and that's part of the thing that the village, there's in villages living those old people. What happens then when they die and those youngsters are living then in the cities without support of educational system? So I just wanted to mention this diversity, that there is many levels challenges coming of that more diverse world.
I really appreciate what Tuija said, because I think, you know, I guess I feel like the Arctic used to be seen as an asterisk, and now we are seen as at the forefront. Climate change is one piece of it, a big piece. And then the other is that what we are experiencing now, people in Malaysia are experiencing. So, then the ways that our young people can connect with those people in other places to try to come up with solutions across the context it's a really amazing opportunity. And I think the challenge for those of us who are the more senior educators is, how do we get the voices of our junior colleagues and our students to the forefront, because the young people are we at COP27 now? I believe that was right. Or the young people protesting in the hallways here. They are the people with the energy and the new ideas to hopefully move us away from this very dangerous pathway we've gone down as a globe and bring us back and build on, and hopefully maybe take a look at what we've got here and figure out ways to act on it.
Yes, indeed. And now we have definitely run into overtime. So I thank you all for your attention, both here physically and if you're following online. And I thank my panel members for a very engaging and engaging discussion. So thank you.
Thank you.